Coach, how's it
What's up,
going?
Taylor? Good. How are you?
I'm good, man. Man,
No sweat,
I
man.
really appreciate the time, man.
Hey, no worries at all.
Been wanting to reach out for over a year now, anyways. I've just wanted to wait for the right time, but
It's all good.
thanks for taking the time.
All the months are like equally busy, so it's just different
Yes,
stuff in each month. But I'm glad it worked out.
awesome. So, Coach Cressey, man, my first question for you was, you know, from the private sector to the professional organization, from not even being a baseball guy, maybe a quick summary on your story and how all that played out, man.
Yeah, for sure. So I think like most coaches, I joke I was a fantastically mediocre athlete. Like I think we meet a lot of athletes these days that say, if I'd only had you back when I was in high school, I would have been a pro. I'm like, I probably would have been an average Division II athlete with good strength and conditioning back then. So actually got into the tennis and soccer world as a youth athlete. Those were kind of my two primary sports in high school. Wound up having a bunch of shoulder issues, some other health issues that kind of basically cut me off from playing college sports and spent ages 18 to 20 really just trying to get healthy, get my body weight in a good place, fix my shoulder up. So it's kind of layered. And I'd originally gone off to school thinking I was going to be an accountant, and after about 3 or 4 semesters of college, I realized that wasn't the path for me, and I was actually much more passionate about kind of the strength and conditioning stuff, the nutrition stuff, everything that I was learning, kind of my own self study. So I switched, changed schools. Went to the University of New England, did a double major in exercise science and sports management. Then went on to the University of Connecticut, did my grad degree in kinesiology, and that was where I really caught the strength and conditioning bug. So once I'd been there, mostly working honestly with basketball and soccer, kind of our heyday in the early 2000s at UConn. It just so happened when I went to the private sector, some of the first athletes that I started working with were baseball players. So that was early 2000s. It wasn't like the era of strength and conditioning where there were private facilities on every street corner, and we really just decided let's attack this demographic. Let's try to give them some of the services that they really aren't getting anywhere else. And I think it served us really well. So a lot of those guys who were high school players back then went on to play college baseball. The college guys became pro guys. Obviously, pro guys kind of spread the word with teammates and agents and things like that. So now at our private facilities, we work with guys from all 30 organizations, tons of college guys, lots of amateur players. And then, 2019 at the end of the year, I was hired by the New York Yankees to basically oversee strength and conditioning and nutrition for their organization. So I just wrapped up my 6th year of doing that. So kind of have a couple different full-time jobs with different focuses depending on what time of year it is. It's all stuff I enjoy, and so got a pretty good pulse on kind of the amateur and professional baseball side.
When so as an independent guy or in the private sector, like you and Lauren Lando have always been huge mentors for me, even just from afar. Not even talking to you guys, but just seeing how you guys grew quality, how you guys scaled that, and then how you got into that private sector. What do you think? Or sorry, how you got into the professional sector? What do you think separated you guys? Because I mean, there's thousands of us, you know what I mean, that are in the private world. What do you think was the separator from?
It's funny. I don't think I'm inherently like smarter. Like I don't think I'm good looking. I'm not sure I'm particularly charismatic. The one thing I was always really willing to do was make sacrifices. I didn't spend a penny on alcohol in my college career. I worked all the way through college. I really foregoed a lot of fun, really from ages 18 to 24. This was something I was really committed to, in part because I needed it to, get my own physical health in a good place at that time. But I was really willing to like, forego a lot of fun in those in those 6 years. Like if you look back, I was that nerd. I was the kid that, the other guys in class would bust my balls about, basically killing the curve and stuff like that. Like I put a lot of time and a lot of effort, but just as importantly, I saved a lot of money. I worked all the way through college. I was lucky when I got to grad school that I had a grad assistantship. I bartended off campus. I personal trained off campus. I just put in a lot of hours over a really extended period of time, and it put me in a good place, honestly, to take more chances with my career early on. Whereas other people were probably digging their way out of student loan debt, and they were focused on where they were going for spring break and all that stuff. Like that was never of interest to me. I really had a pretty clear long-term vision on, wanting to do some cool things in this industry. So I think where that was, it was helpful was when we decided to open the first Cressey Sports Performance in 2007. I had already, saved quite a bit. We self-funded. By that point, I was writing books, producing DVDs, giving seminars, stuff like that. So I was able to fund, in-house, and I think that's important because so many people have to go and get, small business loans, or they have to get clients who become investors, all that stuff, and that was never on the table for us. And I think it allowed us to have some versatility as we grew, and be a little bit more nimble as opposed to trying to please all our investors and stuff. So it gave us the wherewithal to grow at the right time. But beyond that, I was blessed with some really good mentors. I had Tina Murray, Chris West, Rajesh Patel, at the University of Connecticut when I first got going, and all of them really let me spread my wings. And that was just on the transition side. We had, Dr. William Kramer, Dr. Carl Marish, I had some great faculty members there that really challenged you. And more importantly, they created a really good environment of curiosity where everyone asked a lot of questions. Everybody was very down to earth and helped one another. So I thought that helped me a lot early in my career. On the business side, people like Alan Cosgrove, Pat Rigsby, people I could always, pick their brain. I was lucky. I come from a family of accountants, so I was always relatively fiscally responsible just being around it. But I think it's probably to hack an expression, but I was willing to make sacrifices, and I was willing to work really, really hard and do a lot of long hours.
I love it. And do you, and I don't mind you if you mind me asking, do you own all of your buildings? So the ones in, like, with the one you're building in Florida too, obviously the giant compound, I mean, do you own that property? Is that just you and your business partner, or do you have multiple investors, or?
Yeah, so it's an interesting one. So Massachusetts, we rent. That one's the easy one. We always have up there. Florida is actually what's called a public-private partnership. It's actually one of the first ones in the history of the state of Florida. So it was relatively unheard of. So for context, we'd been located in Jupiter, Florida. When we first came down, we rented space, had kind of like this growing clientele. The city of Palm Beach Gardens had always been really, really good to work with. They're one city south of where we were. And we would run our Major League Baseball spring training at Palm Beach Gardens High School. We had a really good rapport with them. So we needed field access. We were able to do that. And it was great. We had, 30 big leaguers that would go out on a high school field that was really well kept, and they took good care of us. What actually happened was we were getting closer to the end of our lease in Jupiter, and we had some good relationships with the city. And these P3 agreements were relatively new, and the city actually approached us because Palm Beach Gardens is known not just in Florida, but honestly relatively nationally and internationally as being a real destination for sports tourism. So for context, they have the Cognizant Classic is a big PGA tournament here. The city of Palm Beach Gardens just had Real Madrid here to prepare for like a big tournament, in North America. So they do a lot of these big events. The Nashville MLS franchise came down and spent a month practicing down here. So they look for opportunities to really nurture sports tourism. And what was great was we bring a lot of players from all over the country. Like if you go to our caller ID at the Florida facility, you get way more numbers outside of the 561 area code calling in than you do within it. So they recruited us, and as part of the agreement, basically how it works is we built a private building on public land. So we pay a ground lease fee to the city each year, and then we pay permitting fees that basically help out with things like landscaping, field maintenance,
Yep.
turf access, things along those lines. And right now, as of literally last week, when we get our certificate of occupancy on our expansion, we have 31,000 square feet. Basically over two large buildings. One's 19,000, one's 12,000, and they're kind of sandwiched between 80 yards of turf and a full-size stadium field. And so basically, at the end of a 31-year lease, we return those buildings to the city in good working condition, and then we have two leases that can follow that up if we want to rent them back from the city. So I joke our buildings are kind of a hunk of prepaid rent, but they'll obviously span my career, my kids' career if they want to get involved in the business. So that's kind of how it all works. But we've always been self-funded. We have no investors from the outside. It's been something that's served us well. I think what we've done is we've grown responsibly, as opposed to just like, hey, let's open a $5 million facility the first week and we have no clients. We always gave ourselves the opportunity to grow a little bit more piecemeal until we were ready to bite off the big one, which would have been the 2019 expansion that we took on.
So we have two facilities. We own one, rent the other one, and then trying to build and own the third one. For us, we're in Boise, Idaho. It's the building process has been an absolute pain, man.
Yeah,
Trying to
it's
get
tough.
permitting and codes and everything like that. But real quick before we kind of get into some more of the baseball
Yeah.
specific stuff, when you're building, because just looking at stuff online, like I got to come visit in Florida, but how do you intertwine like the training, the therapy, and then the performance? Because you got to have like I'm trying to literally we're in the design process right now. We're under contract, and I'm like trying to make it to where it's you can have your own clinic rooms. You can be with the PTs, you can have the ATs, but I still want them to feel like they're a part of the performance. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What was your philosophy on that?
Yeah, we've done it both ways. I always want our therapists to feel like they're intermingled with the strength and conditioning coaches. I think that's really, really important. Honestly, the challenge we had was when we first opened, we didn't have enough office space. So we would always have PTs like out treating. What I don't want is somebody like dry needling in the middle of a busy gym, like open sharps containers to the side of them. So what we would have is we'd have a lot of scenarios where like there were certain portions of the facility that got very, very congregated. So we actually settled on we built a physical therapy clinic I mean, it's pretty good size. It's got room for 4 treatment tables in there, and it's basically abuts the warm up area, so it's perfectly like intermingled. So they can do their manual therapy, and then they can cruise right out to the gym and do their Therex stuff out there. So those guys are 100% integrated. Like they share a waiting room with the gym. They obviously share bathrooms, showers, stuff like that. So I think that served us well. Literally, for what it's worth, we just moved into our new facility like in the past 2 days. So I couldn't even tell you how it's going because like they actually haven't had a chance to unwrap their tables yet. So we will know in the
Awesome.
next probably 2 months. But for now, it feels right. If not, I just spent a lot of money for no reason.
Oh, I love it. Are your therapists on staff as well? Are they like Cressey physical therapists or?
So we have kind of two dynamics. One, we have a chiropractor that's on staff with CSP,
Okay.
and then our physical therapist. There's three of them. There's a physical therapy LLC that rents from Cressey Sports Performance, Florida.
Okay, sweet. Cool. Coach, so we work with our biggest thing is like high schools. Like we work with 15 high schools here, the middle school, the high school level.
Mhm.
We have a guy with the Rockies. We have some young guys that we've helped grow through the ranks, but in Idaho, Boise State doesn't even have college baseball. We did, and we were killing it, and COVID killed that. I hope it comes back one day. We were the head strength staff for an NAIA college here, so we run their
Mhm.
program, which is awesome. But for us, strength, it's tricky with every sport, but baseball is always, it goes two ways. It's a pitcher doesn't want to lift the weight, thinks they're going to be sore, thinks they're going to get it tight, and they're not going to, it's going to slow down velo. Or it's an old school, the more I can squat, clean, and bench, the harder and the faster I'm going to be able to hit a ball off my bat. You know what I mean? For me, you've been a huge influence on the strength side of things with baseball, with the youth development as they work their way up in the high school development. Like the profiling that you guys do is so next level. When we have a guy like 35 kids at one time, like an entire team, like with a high school, to where maybe we don't have that tech. We have a couple sets of force plates, but we don't always get to use them. If we
Mhm.
were going to bucket them, or separate them into different groups, how would you do that maybe at that youth level, or how did you do that when you were working with more youth athletes?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we didn't always have this tech. For what it's worth, though, like you can always test broad jumps, right? You can always test, things along those lines. But I mean, I hate to say it, but if you're going to bucket guys, it's trained and untrained, like at that level. Like if we're talking about younger kids,
Yep.
because we both know, like you can have a 15-year-old that's loosey goosey, never stepped foot in a weight room, that just literally needs to earn a seat at the table, right? And we've seen some 15-year-olds like we got a couple kids that have been with us since like 11 and 12, and they honestly, they're like assistant coaches on the floor now. They've been around so long. Like they're more tenured than some of our staff members. So I think that's vitally important. My daughter Lydia is like a very, very serious gymnast, and she comes in the weight room like she knows how to fill out her program. She's 10. Like she's meticulous about all of it. So I think, that's one of the things I would tell you is like there's trained and there's untrained. But if we're talking about how we batch athletes, we use an infrasternal angle model, the wides versus the narrows, and it is a continuum, like it's perfectly on one of those, but that is generally a good thing that you can utilize once you get athletes that are a little bit more advanced. I'd argue that it probably doesn't matter a whole lot if we're talking about a 13-year-old kid who's never been in the weight room. We still need to teach him how to hinge, squat, do single leg stuff, row, pull up, push up, all that stuff. But I think those are probably good places to start with that group. Also, like we'll batch based on infrasternal angle. So, I think some people would argue whether it matters, and I'm not sure it really does at a young age, but once you get a level of, kind of training foundation, I think, looking at your wides versus your narrows, and obviously there's a continuum for all that is super important as well. You get these wide guys and you want to sell out for the strength that they're probably really good at gaining versus the narrows. Like if you do that same kind of thing, you might take away their superpower, which is, elasticity and rotational capacity. So, but I think everybody needs a good 18 to 24 months of really good training in the teenage years to be worried, really about those conversations.
Can you give me a little synopsis on the infrasternal angle? We've been talking about it a little bit. One of my coaches we had for like 6 years, he's with the Dodgers now. Like he's in their single A organization, but we've been trying to work on it. And again, parents and coaches, it's just so old school. You know what I mean? And saying that there's different ways to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. So, first I would tell you, check out Bill Hartman's stuff. He's got a ton of great resources in this regard. But, for all intents and purposes, you have kind of different rib cage presentations. If you can look at the infrasternal angle on the front of a rib cage, guys that are very, very wide, their archetype would be such that, these are typically your power lifters, your fullbacks, your guys who are built for brute force, production. They generally tend to be very muscularly driven. These are guys that
Okay.
often lose rotational capacity. They're really well equipped, honestly, for handling compression, right? They're good at running into things and lifting heavy weights. Versus your narrow ISAs, these are going to be your triple jumpers, your 6'4", 185-pound athletes who throw 95 miles per hour. They tend to be very, very springy, more elastic, and not everybody falls on one of these ends of the continuum. Most people are kind of somewhere in the middle. But you just realize that this is why you take a narrow and you lift really, really heavy for a long time, and you actually slow them down. You take a wide and you don't train them with enough, pure strength stuff, and you're probably not tapping into their athletic potential. So you've got to figure out what everybody needs. But those wides also, you got to work really hard to preserve rotational capacity in them. So I think it just gives you a little bit of a glimpse into how people are going to move, what their preferred strategies are, just as importantly, how you're going to manage them over the course of a career.
I love it. We do a lot on the speed side of things, you know what I mean, with most of our athletes. And it's like people see that, as like whether it's pushers or pullers or, you know what I mean, all the different analogies, but on somebody really good accelerating compared to somebody that, is more of a spinner and they're really good at top speed. But to see that, transition the same way they throw and they hit, is huge. With us, we're having I know it's an epidemic everywhere, but with the UCLs, but with young athletes, we're having some discussions with some. I don't know if I have the right answers either. We work with so many baseball players and it's like, hey, you're trying to get ahead and
Mhm.
your friend might be doing better than you is throwing this much. You know what I mean? No, I need to keep throwing on this end, We're having some of these issues to where it's like, do we just choose baseball instead of play multiple sports? If I don't choose baseball, if I don't work my way up, I know you get asked this question all the time, but it's one I wanted to hear from you too. Do you think that it's not even just about playing multiple sports, but taking a break from throwing is important? And when can you put your foot on the gas? When can you take your foot on the gas? Like what are your thoughts behind it on the young
Yeah.
athlete?
Yeah, it's the $1 million question. Honestly, probably $1 billion question if you think about the
Um,
number of injuries, that are tabulated in that kind of economic impact. But what I would tell you is the tricky thing about throwing is you need to throw enough to create adaptation, both in the context of like the structural adaptation of, retroversion in your throwing shoulder, and you need a ligament that thickens up just a little bit in response to that stress. But at the same time, you don't want so much stress, constantly that you maladapt, right? And that's probably true of any training stimulus. But the
right.
difference is the throwing a baseball is the single fastest motion ever recorded in sports, right? 7,000 degrees per second of internal rotation. So this is very different than just going and playing soccer year round or being a track athlete where you sprint year round. Like it's very, very focal kind of stress. And it's asking a joint that's basically a hinge to be something that's not a hinge, right? The elbow is the most susceptible here. So it's a very challenging, question to kind of work through. What I'll tell you is that the big leagues are loaded with late bloomers. with kids that played multiple sports and developed a little bit later on, and gradually increased that kind of stress that grew into their body, took part in strength and conditioning before they chased big velocity numbers. Like what I can probably tell you the best is in the context of strength and conditioning, we opened CSP in 2007. I did not see a single Tommy John surgery between 2007 and 2012. And this was me training 90% baseball players. It was what I saw all day, every day. We saw pro guys starting in 2006. I want to say, yeah, I was seeing some guys before we even opened the facility. We had college guys all the way through, multiple state players of the year in high school baseball. Like we had good players that were going and playing Division I sports. 2012, all of a sudden elbows started exploding. And we didn't dramatically change the way we were training. Like I love people that are like, strength conditioning is causing this. I'm like, no, strength conditioning has been around for a really long time. What happened in 2012, frankly, the internet popularity surged. A lot of people started throwing weighted balls. And I'm not just vilifying weighted balls. I'm saying a lot of people fell in love with really aggressive throwing programs, right? So it wasn't just weighted balls. It was like, the running pull downs into a net, everybody competing. It became a very metrically driven world around that time. So that was the first inflection point when the injuries started to skyrocket. And it's interesting, MLB published, their report on injuries in baseball, and they actually showed, not just the major league injuries, but they actually looked at the number of surgeries at the Andrews Institute, which has been around in the sports medicine world for a really long time. So they looked at high school and college numbers, and they skyrocketed. So that was the first big inflection point from an injury standpoint. And things were bad for a while. And then they spiked again with, basically 20 to 22, which was basically the impact of COVID. Why? Because people all went in their garage and did aggressive throwing programs, right? They all basically threw weighted balls against walls. And then the other thing that happened around 21 was players started doing really, really aggressive like pitch design work. Started throwing a lot more sweepers was probably the biggest thing is the industry on the whole got much, much better. And I had Dr. Keith Meister on my podcast, and he said that chasing horizontal movement is a big problem. We just had a study that came out this past summer that basically showed that flexor injuries in Major League Baseball players doubled over the last, 18 months. If you look at, basically, I think it was 2022 to compare to 2024 in the study. Don't quote me on that, but so we're seeing these big inflection points when the actual skill development side of baseball takes place in a new way, right? So, I joke, strength and conditioning coaches, we're like referees to the sports medicine field folks. We're referees. We're just trying to slow the crazy chase for adaptation. But the hard part is the game is played at fastest speeds ever. Like, like if you were a pitcher in the mid 80s, like throwing 86 to 88 with a sinker, like you can't compete in this game anymore. Velocity has gone up sky high. And the craziest part about it is the hitters have gotten so much better too. Like we always thought pitchers were just going to outpace hitters, and now hitters have traject, they're hitting high speed velo. Like you're seeing guys hit home runs on 102-mile-an-hour pitches. I mean, there aren't a lot of them, but there weren't even guys sniffing 100 back in the day. You had maybe a Randy Johnson or a Bob Gibson, who are these generational athletes, and now you go and you see, two or three triple digit arms on every major league roster. You saw a kid in the draft last year that threw over 100 left-handed that didn't even get drafted out of high school. So the game has changed very dramatically, over the last 15 years. And unfortunately, you're talking about a ligament that's very, very susceptible. And the problem, unfortunately, is those ligaments are maladapting really early. In the past, you would see these guys who would, they develop wear and tear over the course of a career. When you blow out at 15, and then you got to get that, Tommy John surgery then, and then all of a sudden it's 24 and you're having the same problem. Like, are we gonna have guys have triple Tommy Johns? They're gonna be in their early 30s having a third ligament, and it's hard to say how the industry on the whole is going to respond to that.
Do you think, with your younger athletes, as a strength and conditioning coach, where you don't have control of their throwing program, when you're trying to build around maybe their bullpen times or when their long toss program or whatever that is, what is usually your philosophy on that? Like, where do you feel like that you can actually make an impact on one, maybe, mitigating the risk of that injury? I know it's preventing, it's almost impossible, but mitigating it, or also helping increase the velocity. Because, the kids want to take a risk. I mean, the kids want to get paid. I mean, everybody wants to throw 90 miles and everybody wants to throw 100 because they want to get paid. So it's like that, trying to balance those two.
I'd say the first thing is remember that there are avenues to adding velocity safely, right? The problem is not so much the 17-year-old kid that's throwing 92 miles an hour. The problem is the 17-year-old kid that's 6'4", 150 pounds with a dad who likes to showcase his son, right? That's the problem, is there isn't an inherent problem with the stress. It's how it's distributed throughout the year and how the athlete is actually achieving it. Like if you put that on a kid who's 6'3", 200, who's got a good foundation of strength and conditioning, I love it, right? So I think the problem is we're not maxing out gains that we can get from strength and conditioning, from a good medicine ball program, from a good arm care program, from just quality nutrition and sleep. Like those are the things that for me are the foundational strategies that allow us to do the next level stuff when kids get to 17 and 18, and even beyond, obviously. So I think that's the first thing. But the second thing is it all comes down to relationships, right? It's having a strong enough relationship that you can then sit down with a kid and their parents, and you outline a yearly competitive calendar, and you talk about where the highs, where the lows are going to be, and you agree that you're going to stick with it. And actually MLB just put in, I don't know if you know this, they just put an amateur recovery policy in place where scouts actually can't scout. It's basically October 15th through January 15th. It's a little
Yep.
different from the college and the high school guys. So, in the past, you'd see, scouts showing up to watch like high school kids throw bullpens in January. And, you'd see incentive for a lot of these like showcase type things for November and December. And granted, this is MLB. Like the problem is, you know, there's college camps, there's also, showcases, put on by private sector enterprises just about every weekend throughout the year. So those are just as concerning. But in general, I think we just need to figure out times when players can throw and develop and have it not be competitive. Because we both know as strength and conditioning coach, a competition max is way more stressful than a training max. And so
Every
we need
time.
to take a step back and do a little bit more prep and a little bit less showcasing, unfortunately.
A strategy they've been using lately here, which I have seen zero results with, and I'm trying to. We're really close with the parents, and we're really close with a lot of the coaches. Like we've been with these teams for 10 years, and I mean, some of the guys that coached for me, they were high school players, played a little pro ball, came here, but they're doing PRP injections in the UCL. So there's like a micro tear. They're doing a PRP injection. These are 15, 16 year olds, rest them, and then ramp up, and then almost every time, then it goes anyways, and then they get this. So it's almost like we almost lose 2 seasons. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? I'm trying to figure out how to recover that with some of the therapists here. We're like trying to figure out like what how do you put your foot on the gas? I mean, is that something you've ever worked with?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll backtrack it a little bit. And the first thing I'll say is remember that, and we're talking about kids who have presumably partial ligament injuries, right? They have partial UCL injuries and they throw PRP and they hope, right? Um, the challenge is first off that you don't see a lot of true elbow specialists around the country, right? Obviously, if you're a Major League Baseball player, there's really like three guys, maybe four guys that you're going to for your Tommy John surgery, right? Like maybe, if you're a minor league guy, that number extends to like 7 or 8 guys. We have some team doctors that are doing them, things like that. But this is not like a specialty that's on every street corner. And most of the time, what you get is you get like a shoulder and knee guy who dabbles in some elbows on the side. And so we've realized over the years is like elbows are very nuanced, right? Like sometimes the imaging is perfectly clean, right? You do an MRI and a ligament looks great, and they've got this raging case of ulnar neuritis. They've got an ulnar nerve that's subluxating like crazy, and they need a transposition. Like that won't show up on an MRI. But we're also seeing an era of kids who actually just have like overstretched ligaments, right? They don't look bad on MRI, but then you actually do what's called a fever view MRI. They actually put you in external rotation under load, and they check to see how much the elbow gaps. It's a specialized test. You're not going to get that on every street corner. And so they see these guys who fail conservative rehab because their ligament was just overstretched like crazy. It's like the dude who rolls his ankle, and every time he gets out of the car, he rolls it again, right? It's just there's so much laxity. So what I would just tell you is a lot of times we see kids that just don't get good diagnoses in the first place on an elbow, and they throw some PRP and they hope, and then they lose 6 months, right? Because it takes time to shut down, rest it, then you do a gradual buildup, they get all the way back on the mound and the thing hurts again, right?
Right.
So one of the things, the location and the extent of the tear is really important, right? Distal tears generally don't do well conservatively. If you have a tear down by the attachment on the ulna, it's going to do usually poorer than, a partial tear closer to the, the humeral attachment. And so this is where you start talking about, do you do an internal brace? Do you do a full-blown reconstruction, hybrid like they're doing now? A lot of the more advanced athletes are getting flexor repairs at the same time. There's so many layers to all this. But the biggest thing I would tell you is have an awesome elbow specialist that you trust and you can refer to. Like very rarely are you going to get a good diagnosis from a pediatrician, like who just does an x-ray in the office and like there's way more to it. And I deal with elbows, necks, shoulders, hips, knees, everything on a daily basis. Elbows are far and away the most complex joint simply because there are fewer doctors that actually specialize in it. So that's my soapbox, orthopedic moment of
That
the
makes sense. We work with so many ACLs, like we have tons of great knee docs and shoulder docs. We work with that all the time. And then, how we do an elbow every now and again. I didn't even think about, which ones are experts and not. We have a lot of good success, to be honest with you, coming off the UCL, but that PRP is like a new thing that they've just been injecting, and I just haven't had any success with it. And I'm like, is that
Yeah.
even a ligament that we should be injecting that in?
Yeah, I would say the jury is still very much out industry wide on whether PRP really it's certainly not doing any harm. It's not setting people back, but it's a very hard thing to study and it's hard to separate out whether they're getting better just from pure rest or if the PRP is actually facilitating ligament healing. And it's really not healing. The ligament is just calcifying over, right? And that's a very important differentiation I think to make. What we see with ligaments, right, is if you're 15 years old and you go out and you throw 130 pitches and you wake up and your elbows, stuck in flexion the next day, it hurts. Like sometimes those guys have this like low grade partial ligamentous injury, right? It's the area calcifies, and then it becomes kind of this point of weakness. So then all of a sudden that 15-year-old gets into 3 years of strength and conditioning, optimizes mechanics. He's a senior in high school and he's throwing 92, and all of a sudden the elbow goes and you go in and the ligament looks like trash when you actually get in there. So that's one thing that'll happen. The other thing that we're seeing more and more, and this is happening more in the older players, is we're seeing these ligaments that just gradually become bone. They kind of just, the calcification effectively spreads. So for everyone that just like blows out on one pitch, there are a lot that kind of just slowly fail. And these are really hard ones to manage. If I'm being honest, you do your best to strengthen surrounding musculature and optimize the delivery and all these other things. But when you get an elbow that's been bad since a kid was 15 and he's 20, 21, you're honestly like looking at a lot of these guys as ticking time bombs, particularly when they're like we talked about earlier, just they're chasing velocity, they're chasing spin, they're chasing movement. So the industry's in a really hard place right now, and that's why every single case is unique.
Yeah. To go back to performance, because I know that's something we're always trying to get, like I said, velo and exit velocity are like the two biggest things with a wide and a narrow, infrasternal angle.
Yeah.
Like a lower half. You're a huge deadlift guy. I know you're at the beginning of this podcast. You were talking about you were getting flack in college about your buddies making fun of you. They probably weren't making fun of you too much, deadlifting 700, but or more. But as far as like lower half options, and I know it's always there's
Yeah.
it always depends on the athlete. You know what I mean? But what are some of your favorites? Do you like to deadlift with the baseball guys still?
Sure, man.
Trap
Yeah,
bars,
I'll tell
great.
you what, I've done this a long time. I can't tell you how many times I've seen just good things happen when you get a kid who can deadlift 405 for five on a trap bar. Take a high school athlete. The number one thing I've seen is, kid comes in, he's a pitcher, you get him to do that, and all of a sudden he starts hitting home runs. He goes from being a pitcher only to actually being a really legitimate hitter and efficient
I
routine.
needed that back in the day.
Yeah, learning how to like put force in the ground and just be efficient with the rotation, it carries over. So yeah, man, we push our high school kids. We want them to get stronger. We use the force plates to monitor improvements. We always want to be careful of like as we're getting stronger, if peak velocity is really tanking, you have to kind of ask the questions of whether it's functional body weight you're putting on or whether the strength training is slowing them down. But we use the force plates and you pretty much take jump momentum and peak velocity. And the hope is that they go up just like this, or that jump momentum goes up and peak velocity at least holds consistent. And then
Okay.
the weight you're putting on is good. But peak velocity tanks, that's generally not a good thing.
Jump momentum and peak velocity, those are the two biggest things you look at.
Those are probably the two that we look at. Obviously, we're looking at asymmetries, graph shape, some of that stuff. But, you could look at modified reactive strength index, which is, jump height divided by time to take off as like a quick snippet. But I like to get into the nitty gritty of the data and really look at like, improvements. But it's crazy, man. Some of these athletes, you'll see 15% improvements in 4 to 6 weeks sometimes. So they have these big windows of adaptation. You just got to kind of unlock that neurological system, right?
When you one of the biggest things that you talk about too, I listen about everything that you talk about, but it's sleep, right?
Yeah.
And obviously the pro athletes is tricky because they'll play till midnight sometimes, and then have to travel the next day and do stuff like that. For us, with young kids, even with me and like our professional athletes, like I have a few NFL guys. This is what I wanted to ask you. When they feel like you're doing everything right, when we're putting the screen away, we've done like NSDR, we've done like resets at night, but it's like their circadian rhythm's still off. It's
Yeah.
or something to where it's like maybe they either can fall asleep right away, but they wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning, or they're just laying in bed and they can't get it. Are there any strategies? Or are there anything that you've used to help? I mean, magnesium is something that we've always talked about and those things, but is there anything that you've had to where it's like when somebody's just so messed up and try to get them
Yeah.
back on track?
It's tough, man. I'll say this first. I'm a terrible sleeper. Like I've struggled with this myself my entire career. I'm the guy like, we'll finish up this podcast. I will put my head on the pillow an hour from now and I will be asleep within 3 minutes. I'll be out. But then I'll wake up at 1:30 in the morning and I'll be like, all right, I got this, and this to do.
That's
Um,
exactly how I am.
yeah, so great minds think alike or don't think, or think at the wrong times, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things I'll tell you, I've always learned and I've always appreciated every hour before midnight is worth two after midnight. I know I'm an early bird, we're probably higher cortisol guys in the morning, right? We're different than our buddies who can't wake up and need to jump in an ice bath at 6 a.m. to get themselves going, right? Like I'm up, like let's go. Every hour I can get in before my kids wake up is precious time. So I think getting to sleep earlier is big. I think for athletes who tend to be these morning people, ones that wake up early no matter what, getting to bed early is cute. And I think you got to learn how to nap because that is a vitally important strategy, especially if we're talking about like a morning person. Like we've had pro baseball players who wake up at 7 a.m. no matter what, right? So we get back 4 a.m. and they wake up at 7. Those are guys that have to teach themselves how to nap. And then I think beyond that too, if you actually look at a lot of the sleep research, the single most important thing you can do for your athletes for sleep is to just talk about it, to remind them it's okay to sleep in. Like we have this societal kind of fixture on like you're lazy if you sleep in, you don't get out of bed early. Man, if I could nap every day, I would. If my schedule allowed, I've joked to my wife that I just got a new office in our facility expansion. I'm gonna put a couch in there. And I'm gonna book like a 1 to 1:30 p.m. phone call every day and just take like a power nap. It
Yes.
would change my life. It would make me exponentially more efficient in everything I do. So I think learn to nap because it makes sense over the big picture. Get to bed early for sure. I think all the other stuff that you talked about is vital, right? You can look at supplemental stuff. I just started up with AGZ myself, and I've seen some benefits from that. So I'm optimistic that that'll be a difference maker. Obviously, getting rid of screen light, close to bed, turning the temperature down. Here's one thing I'll give you a cheat code that was helpful for me. Um, my two best nights of sleep this year were at Disney, which makes no sense, right? You take my wife and I took our three kids to Disney. Like there are fireworks going off like right outside this hotel up until 9:30 at night. You're sharing a room with three kids. We've got three iPads charging from the ride there. We've got both our cell phones, both our laptops, because my wife and I are doing work like after the kids go to sleep. We're all sharing like a two-bedroom room. One kid's asleep on a pull-out sofa. But I slept like a log, and I'm like, what the heck happened? Did 21,000 steps at Disney, but sunlight exposure all day. Like we were at the parks, early 7, 8 a.m. all the way until like watching the fireworks at the end. So you're literally, Huberman's talked about this a lot. Sunlight exposure early in the day, I think is something I need to do a better job with. But it was wild, man. Like I'm normally like a 6 hour, change if
Yeah,
I'm, and I
but
slept
you
well over 7 at Disney.
that's crazy. That's
Well,
crazy.
I was sharing a double bed with a 10-year-old while my wife was with her twin sister in the next bed over.
Well, you in Disney though, you woke up and you couldn't work.
Yeah, that's
I feel
part of
like
it too.
sometimes when I'm in those environments, I either don't sleep at all because I feel like I should be, or it's like, hey, I can't do anything anyway, so
Yeah,
I'm gonna,
it's a good
I'm,
point.
yeah, I'm gonna sleep. No, I struggle with. I'm the same thing where but I feel like it makes me less efficient. But I'll wake up at 1:30 or 3 every single day and
Yeah,
try to go back to sleep if I can. But
I hear you. It must be a strength coach thing.
usually it doesn't work. Yeah, yeah, or a business owner thing.
But
With the business side of things, where you have, yeah, with multiple locations, and with multiple locations, and now obviously being with the Yankees, how do you keep the same culture? How do you keep the same standard? How do you get like something I've never heard ever is like bad quality at Cressey Performance? We've had a couple guys come through you guys, which has been awesome to work with, but like it's always like the same experience. It's always high quality, even in you might not even step into one of those buildings for at least a month at a time, right? I'd have to assume.
yeah,
How
I haven't been to our It's, we're recording this on October 21st. I haven't been to our Massachusetts facility since August. So I'm going back up in November for a couple of days.
are
But
you meeting with them all through Zoom? Are
yeah,
you talking all the time? Is it you're
communicate
standing?
regularly, yeah, some more than others. So obviously I have the Florida facility, we have our Massachusetts facility. With my role in professional baseball, we have folks in New York, we have folks in Tampa, we have folks in the Dominican Republic at our academy there, and then at affiliates, really throughout the season all over. So obviously you lean on technology a lot to try to be in, all those different places at once. But what it really comes down to, man, is just people. Like hire awesome people, invest in them, be available to them and sometimes get out of the way, let them spread their wings and let them discover things that might surprise you. I think
Right.
early in my career I probably micromanaged a lot more than I should have. And that's where I think maybe kids have helped a little bit, is that you realize like people, especially your kids, they don't come with instruction manuals, so sometimes you got to just take a step back and observe. We have been fortunate though. I've hired a lot from our internship program, and that served us well. You evaluate competency and you evaluate fit. It's not hard to evaluate competency, right? Anybody can read a resume and pepper somebody with questions on Zoom. Like what you don't know is how that person's going to be, in the last hour of an 8-hour shift when they're hanging, they've been on their feet all day. Like, are they still bubbly, positive? Are they still greeting clients with fist bumps at the door? So like, I think those are the things that you can really evaluate during an internship. And we've hired several of our former interns to work, under my department in professional baseball, in addition to being at the facility. So you just lean on good people to do cool stuff. But what's the saying? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. That's something I've really believed in.
I love it, man. How's it with the Yankees? Did you ever think you were going to be a director with the Yankees, man?
Yeah, man. I mean, I always, for context, we'd been in the private sector for a long time, and I was with the under 18 national team for Team USA
Okay.
back in 2015, and we won a gold medal in Japan, and it was kind of like a aha moment. Like it was cool to be invested in a team winning or losing, right? To actually have a role in it versus like in the private sector, you deal with so many guys and they all go different ways, and we're gonna have guys playing against each other in the World Series. You just don't, have somebody to really cheer for or against in that regard, other than the people. So it was cool to be really invested in the success of an organization. So when the opportunity came, they sought me out, and I needed to make sure it was the right fit for me and our family, and more importantly, I wanted to evaluate, that my expertise was something that would be right for them as well. And honestly, it's been amazing. I think in your own private business, you're always expected to be the final answer, to sign on the dotted line and to have the answer to all the hard questions. And sometimes you miss out on the opportunity to just be the dumbest person in the room. And unfortunate, in this role in professional baseball, like I work with some brilliant people who challenge me in different ways, and we've got amazing resources and a lot of really well-intentioned people that try really hard to help our athletes. So it's that part is really really cool. I've grown in ways that I can't even put into words. So it's been very cool.
That's awesome, dude. I love it. Well, it's 7 my time, so it's 9 o'clock Eastern. I'm gonna leave you a couple questions real quick. So I always
Yeah.
try to finish one because we always have a strength coach on. Our last one was a more of a reconditioning specialist, but his was a question he wanted to leave for you was, what is one thing that you used to believe in that you've completely changed now in your career?
I love that. So for starters, it's not one thing. I change my mind on stuff absolutely all the time. I think this what I've changed my mind on the most is how strong is strong enough for athletes. I think like most strength coaches, I started out with my own personal bias. I was a power lifter. I competed for years and years and years. And you assume that you can just keep layering strength on. And if you can deadlift 400, then deadlifting 500 will be better, and 600 will be better than that, and all that stuff. So here's something that's an interesting story I told on a different podcast not long ago, but it's probably a good one. So I pulled 660 at a body weight of 180 at my best, right? So 300 kgs. And Christmas Eve 2020, I was staying late to get a quick lift right at the end of the day. Some of the physical therapists were wrapping up, and I wanted to hang out. Um, Squatted heavy, and then at the end of the set, took a 45-pound plate off and turned to put it on an adjacent rack. I heard a pop in my knee, like unloading weights, literally, just kind of like a twist. I'm like, oh, that was weird. Didn't think anything of it, right? Going, I do reverse lunges, I do glute ham raises, I do the Versa climber. Like I powered through the rest of my workout, no pain whatsoever. Go to pick up sushi for my wife and I on the ride home. And I get home and I can't even like straighten my leg in the car. Like things just ballooned up. So big old meniscus tear. I tried to manage it conservatively. The thing locked up on me like 2 weeks later while I was like just trying to step over a landmine in the gym. And so, early January 2021, I had it surgically repaired, right? And great surgery. I was, fortunate to have an awesome surgery. Rehab went really smoothly. By 8 months or so after that, I was moving some pretty good weights in the gym. But ever since that surgery, this my knee just talks to me every time I try to pull anything over like 495, 5 plates aside, right? When I get to that point, it doesn't hurt, but it's like an uncomfortable pressure that basically is like my knee yelling, "Don't be stupid," right? So I kind of know how far I can take it. But what's really, really fascinating is all along I've tried to stay reasonably athletic, like sprint a couple times a week. I've actually got back into playing tennis, which was one of my sports growing up, and that's been really, really fun. I'm faster now than I have been the last probably 15 or 20 years. And I probably have taken 200 pounds off of my best deadlift. Same body weight, same ability to maintain muscle mass, jumping, sprinting, all that stuff. So like the lesson there is you think you need these superhuman levels of strength, and you just need to be strong enough, because what it does is it creates the window of opportunity for you to train all the other qualities, to apply force quickly with your power training, to have joint stability, to own certain positions, to have muscular endurance, to be able to go and play tennis for an hour while you're doing tons and tons of change of direction. So I think that's probably something I've changed my mind on the most. Like, there's just a point I need you guys to be strong enough, and then I'm going to focus on moving that weight way faster at different percentages on the force velocity curve. We're going to attack
Love it.
repetition hard. We're going to do something else, because the goal isn't just to be, good lifters. The goal is to be really good athletes that are supported by effective lifting.
I love it. How about for you, maybe for the next strength coach?
Oh, next question. I'm always curious, and I actually asked this on my own podcast today. I'm always curious what technologies are really intriguing, guys, because that is it's such a rapidly evolving aspect of our field. It feels like just when you buy some, like for context, we spent a little over $40,000 on a high level biomechanics like camera setup in 2021, and we just replaced the whole thing now for literally 5 times the investment for our indoor pitching lab, force plates in the mound and all that stuff, just because the tech gets outdated so quickly. So I'd ask like, hey, what are the must-haves from a tech standpoint for what you're doing day to day?
I love it. I can't wait to see some content on that pitching lab. I've been seeing you guys develop. That thing looks awesome.
It's exciting right now. So we're having a good time with it. And honestly, just nerding out. Like, you learn best with case studies. That's what I've come to realize. And when you get a lot of people in the same room working for one athlete, like a lot of ideas get exchanged, and it's an exciting time.
And then last one thing when you're coaching, because you still coach, you still get to work with the
Yeah.
athlete. What's one thing like in a session or that like athletes do, like little things that just fire you up? Like I always just like obviously when an athlete's on time or
Yeah.
they're early, like that always just fires you up. But what's one of the little things where you just fires you up as a coach?
You're joking about like the on time thing. When they so I'm not a big fan of a lot of the modern rap. And my pet peeve, my biggest pet peeve. So like I was born in 1981. So like, 90s hip hop is probably what I know the best and all that. So like there was no rap back then that just started with talking. So like when a song comes on the radio in the gym and it's just like somebody like reading a poem, it's just like quiet, just words with no beat, no music. That drives me nuts. So I love it when an athlete just skips that stuff.
Yes, let's
Got me
go.
going. Like to me, gym music should be energetic. It shouldn't be, you know, what a lot of these songs are today. So that'll be my
Love it.
soapbox with respect to modern music.
Coach, man, thanks for taking the time. But this will be huge and huge for everybody in our area and everybody, all of our audience. So, man, I really appreciate you taking the time.
No worries, man. Thanks for having me and keep fighting the good fight out there.
Heck yeah.